guys, my name is Chelsea and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I have my March wrap-up. So in the month of March, I did actually read a total of 16 books and a total of 5,379 pages. That is still the most pages I've read in a month so far this year. It just keeps going up. I don't know if I'll be able to read more than that, like in the future, but so far, so good. And I'm going to go over some stats before we get into the actual reviews. So of those 16 books, I did have 1 DNF, 1 2.5 stars, 2 3 stars, 3 3.5 stars, 4 4 stars, 3 4.5 stars, and 2 5 stars. So far, this is the lowest amount of 5 stars that I've had in a month so far this year. I definitely did not have any 5 stars until the Becca's Bookopoly-thon. I will leave my vlog for that link down below, and I was getting a little bit worried because I just wasn't quite hitting those 5 stars, but I did end up with 2. And then for the age ranges, I read 1 middle grade, 4 young adult, and 11 adult titles. And then for the format, I read 1 ARC, 6 ebooks, and 9 physical books. Okay, so that's all for the stats. We're gonna jump right on in. I will be going from the lowest rated book to my favorite book of the month. So my lowest rated book is my DNF. I did end up DNFing A Study in Honor at around page 105. I actually still have my little paper in here because this was the TBR bucket pick for March, and I just really did not enjoy myself with what I was reading. This was supposed to be a sort of like Sherlock Holmes retelling set in a near future in the United States, and I don't think it should have been billed that way. Yes, our characters are named Watson and Holmes, but they do not feel like those characters whatsoever. Our Sherlock Holmes in this, I think her name was Sarah, wasn't even smart from what I could see so far. All she really was rich and was entertaining a lot of people and getting into Watson's personal space and would never apologize, and like it was so much worse than what I was expecting for that. And then our Watson, our Janet Watson in this story, came back from war, missing an arm, has a prosthetic that's not quite right for her, and she does have a lot of like PTSD and anger and depression, and those things are valid. However, I didn't think they really moved the story anywhere because I don't know what this was supposed to be. One, we never even got to the mystery aspect, so like there was nothing in here to compel me to read more. The other thing is I didn't quite know what we were doing in this near future either. So we are in some sort of near future in the United States where there is a second civil war, and they talk a lot about the war. Like there was some war stuff going on in Illinois and Oklahoma, but I didn't fully understand why we were at war. It's probably something to do with the same sort of civil war issues as previously, so like racism and that kind of stuff, but like it was not fleshed out nearly enough. I did like the fact that both of our main characters were female, and that at least for Watson, she had been in a previous female-female relationship, a sapphic relationship. However, apparently, according to some spoilers, it does seem like there is supposed to be some romance between these two characters, but the Holmes character does raise some red flags with that relationship. Like I said before, she doesn't respect personal space, but apparently she also drugs Watson multiple times. It just does not seem good. And then one other big issue for me personally with this is we do have a white author for this book, and I do not necessarily say white people cannot write stories that they're not necessarily familiar with. So like people of color, or if you're straight you can't write LGBTQ stories. Like I'm not here to police that. However, most of the stuff that I read in the first like 105 pages that I read was Watson talking about her relationship with being black in DC in this near future, and it was brought up so much that I just felt so uncomfortable reading more into it. So not only was there like no plot moving the story forward for me, I was so uncomfortable with the aspects of Watson's person that I believe the author does not have personal experience with, as far as I can tell. I'll show you guys right here. This is our author on the back of the book. So yes, I had to DNF this. There was no way I was going forward with it. Then the book that I rated 2.5 stars was Style by Chelsea M. Cameron. I actually talked about this in depth in a reading vlog that I did that was me reading books only by authors named Chelsea, so I will leave that link down below so you guys can have more thoughts about it. However, this is a YA sapphic romance, and I did not feel the writing style was very good with this. The characters were very one-dimensional and a little bit annoying, and I really just wanted more. It started off worse than it ended for me personally, just based in the fact that like the writing style did eventually get better, but I didn't really see why the girls were in a relationship with each other. It was also very, very much focused on sex and lust and like masturbation stuff. I didn't really see the romance aspect for me personally. There also was a lot of coming out in the story, which is not necessarily a bad thing. However, all of the friends and family basically reacted the exact same way for both girls, and so it was very repetitive. Moving into my 3 stars, the first one I have here, truthfully, would have been rated a 2 stars, except for the actual concept of the book, and that is House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. I did not like this. This is a ginormous book, and it honestly gave me multiple headaches. This is written in such a way that it is basically like a dissertation or a textbook, and I could not understand why some of it was so in-depth at certain parts. I just could not wrap my head around this. This is supposed to be sort of like a found footage, except for it's a book, found pages, I guess we're going to say, sort of story, so it's like based in reality, and this is stuff that actually happened, and it is transcribing a like movie about this house that has passageways that are like never ending and changing around, and it's supposed to be creepy. And I will say that I did like the actual house bits the best. However, because of the writing style, the way that this is written, we get a lot more of the analyzing stuff, and we have footnotes from Johnny, who found the pages and like put the rest of it together based on what he found, and I could not stand him as a character. He's basically like a drug addict, layabout type of person, and most of the stuff that he writes about in here is him having sex with women. Multiple women, multiple times, and how is he even getting this much sex? I don't know, but I didn't need to read about it. So he was a little bit annoying. I didn't find the house parts to be super creepy and spooky. Like most people bill this as some sort of horror thriller, and I was not scared whatsoever. I could not stand the actual like textbook style of this stuff. I will say I did give it an extra star because of the concept. I can fully understand that this took a lot of brain power from the author to actually make it the way it is, because there are multiple layers to this story, and I was very intrigued by that, but the actual experience of reading it was not that great for me. And then I will say, even though this is, you know, thriller, horror sort of stuff, you will see like blood and gore and murder and like, you know, death, but one thing that is sort of a no-go for me is animal mutilation and death, and there was a very graphic scene in here at one point that I did not enjoy. The other 3-star I have here is a little bit on the opposite page of House of Leaves, which I thought I should have rated 2 stars, but I did give it an extra star because of the whole concept. This one originally was going to be 4 stars, but I ended up rating it 3 stars because of one element, and that is going to be Killing Time, which is a Star Trek novel by Della Van Heist. So this was my Buzzwordathon pick for March because we needed to have a book with time in it, and I will say that when it started out, I was pretty on board. This deals with the crew of the Enterprise sort of going into an alternate timeline because of the Romulans, and they're trying to figure it out from there. So Kirk is no longer our captain, he is an ensign, and Spock is no longer our first officer, he is the captain. And I was very intrigued by that. I love a good time travel space story. The characters weren't all the right characterization, but I could sort of suspend my disbelief of that because of the fact that they're in an alternate timeline. There are some excuses for that happening. Because they're in this alternate timeline, some people did not adapt very well to the whole mix of the timelines. And so part of what's going on here is they're trying to fix the timeline. Otherwise, everybody's gonna like go crazy and like kill each other and that kind of thing. And so one of the elements in here is Ponfar. I'm gonna put spoilers here just in case, although I'm sure there's a lot of people on my channel that don't care about Star Trek that much either, so I will also put the timestamp you can skip to if you want to skip this. But Ponfar is a Vulcan mating situation where they have to get mated and bonded to someone, or they basically go mad and die. And because of the whole timeline situation, Spock is having to deal with that. And one thing that made me rate it from a 4 stars to a 3 stars is we have a situation where he's basically getting to the end of the Ponfar stuff. He needs to create a bond, otherwise he is going to die. And our main bad guy of the story is a Romulan woman who decides to take it upon herself to save him. She sends Dr. McCoy out of the area and, you know, mind melds with Spock to convince him to have sex with her, basically, to save him. He doesn't want to do this, he is very against this, and it felt very non-con sort of rapey. I was very on board with the story until this part. It does then go like closed door, you don't get to see it on page, but not only that, after that happens, apparently the whole reason for the Romulans to change the timeline, to like send people back in time to change the timeline, is because she has feelings for Spock. Like, why are we making the main bad guy bad and causing these issues because she wants to get with a guy? Like, I just can't support that. I was so annoyed that that's what it ended up being. As soon as that happened, she was no longer the bad guy. She just wanted to like declare her love for Spock, and I'm just... that was not what I was here for. And this is a woman writer as well. I mean, it was published in 1980 something, so I don't know, but I was so on board with the whole time travel stuff until then. Moving into our 3.5 stars, the first one I have here is Folklords by Matt Kint. This is a whole collection of comics. So it was a comic bind up, I should say. It was 5 issues total, and this is apparently a limited series, so it is completely finished. This is a very interesting mix of folk tales, fantasy type of world, and our modern day world, because our main character in this story is Ansel, who lives in the fantasy world, the folk tale world, and he's about to go on a quest, and he has decided that his quest is to find the Folklords, because he has been having dreams about our world. People in a suit and tie going to work in skyscrapers. Like, super interesting, right? However, the further we get into the story, I do like the characters a lot. I liked where we were going, but by the time we got to issue 4 and 5, the end of this story, there was a reveal of who the Folklords were, but there was no explanation for it whatsoever. It just sort of ended. And then the very last part of this thing, I felt could have left it open for more, but it is a limited series, it is completely done. I just had more questions than answers. I don't know why this was written. It didn't seem to have a full purpose. Like, it started off like it was gonna be so amazing and like revolutionary, and I was gonna have my mind blown, and I didn't. And that's why it's a 3.5. I was really hoping for like a 4 or 4.5, it going up and getting better as I went through this volume, but it didn't. I just got left with more questions than answers. The next 3.5 I have here is Binti by Nnedi Okorafor. This one is a novella, and I do feel like that is part of the reason this is a 3.5 for me. This is about Binti, who is basically the first person from her culture getting to go to a space academy, and I was super interested by that. But then things happen in the middle of the book that I don't want to like really talk about, because like I think they could definitely be spoilers. I was so happy I didn't know about them going into it, but it changes the whole dynamic of the book, and I didn't feel like we got enough answers. That's going to be a very common thing for me if I rate things a little bit lower. I just really needed to know more about why certain things were going on. I loved Binti as a character. I loved the knowledge of her culture and like her identity and stuff that was going on, but I didn't fully get what I wanted from this book, if that makes sense. I know it is the first in a trilogy, I believe it is, so I definitely do still want to continue and see if that makes it a little bit better, but I was just left with a little bit of like, oh, this happened, but like we didn't get any sort of consequences for these actions or resolution for these actions, really, and I wanted more about why. And then the next 3.5 stars I have here is Set to Music by Najine Papin. This I actually did read as an ARC, and this is pretty good. However, I just felt the actual like plot of this novel did not quite hit it for me. This is an adult romance between an Iranian ER doctor and a Latino rock star, and I was so on board. One thing I will say is I absolutely did love the actual characterization of these characters, especially with their cultures. We get to see a lot of them with their cultures and their mothers, and I lived for that. However, the whole main premise of this like romance is that our main character Daria is actually going to be going on tour with these musicians to take care of Anthony's younger brother Carlos, who has an arrhythmia situation. And so Anthony and Daria are our main characters. But the main thing that I didn't quite jive with as much is that every single time we see them on this tour sort of thing, it's a sit-down conversation between the two characters, and they talk about a life situation, and then it apparently like skips ahead a few days to a week, and they have another sit-down conversation between the two characters about somebody else's life situation, and then it happens again and again. And eventually we got to the point where we had a little bit more stuff going on, but the whole like love story, the romance, happened during these conversations. We never get to see them interact with the other characters as much, and so I really was missing the like day-to-day aspect or the growing romance aspect. It just didn't quite happen. Now, one thing I will say, because I absolutely did love the like characters and the representation that was in this book, I want to read more by this author, but this book is not just a romance. It also deals very heavily with cancer and a family member passing away from cancer. So do keep that in mind, because I did go in expecting more of the like happier romance. And I mean, yes, Daria is an ER doctor, but I wasn't expecting multiple chapters of the family watching somebody pass away from cancer, like actively, and then having to deal with the aftermath. It was a lot. Moving into our 4 stars, the first one I have here is Come Forth in Thaw by Jason Robert Ducharme. This is another novella, which is part of the reason it's a 4 instead of a 5. I really, really did enjoy this horror novella. We are basically following a mother who is going to a suicide forest to stop her teenager from committing suicide. And this does have a lot to do with suicide talk, so just keep that in mind. I actually did go into more depth about this one in my Bookopoly-thon vlog, so keep that in mind as well. But my biggest issue with this is I didn't fully understand the ending. Like, I wish we had a little bit more wrap up, a little bit more why things happened. I did really love the fact that he was trying to include talk about depression and mental illness in the suicide talk. So it wasn't just a like sensationalized story about suicide. There was some nuance to it, but the ending let me down just a little bit. The next 4 stars I have here, I also talked about in the Bookopoly-thon vlog, and that is going to be Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers. The one thing I will definitely say here, do not go into this expecting a romance. This is not a romance story. This is definitely an adult contemporary with romance elements. There is a relationship in it, but it is not a romance. This is basically a story about Grace, who has just finished her PhD in astronomy, and when she goes to celebrate that, she does end up getting accidentally, drunkenly married to a girl in Vegas, but she's basically trying to figure out her life after getting her PhD. She is a half-black woman, and she is dealing with a lot of racism in the astronomy world, in the sort of corporate world, like trying to find a job. And so there is a lot of that stuff in here. I did really love the characters. I loved the fact that she is going through stuff and we have to see her go through stuff. One thing I will say, just for me personally, the friend groups in here are very touchy-feely. And there's not necessarily a bad thing, because I do definitely feel like there's a stigma in the United States against too much like physical touch. Like if you're physically touching somebody, it is almost always construed as sexual or a relationship, like a romantic relationship. And in here we have a lot of that where it is strictly platonic, and I did love seeing it. However, I am not that type of person, so I also was just a little bit like, why is every single friend in both friend groups that were in here a touchy-feely person? Because it felt like there was too much of that, if that makes sense. Although I'm definitely on board with more books showing touchy-feely friendship relationships, because I don't like that it is stigmatized so much, but every single friend in every single friend group in here was touchy-feely, no matter what. The next 4 stars I have here is Remember Me by Chelsea Bobulski. This one, again, I talked about in the Chelsea vlog, and this I did give 4 stars because I loved most of this book. This book follows 2 different girls on 2 different timelines in this one hotel. So basically we follow Lee in, I believe it was 1907, and then we follow Nell in 2019, and Nell is seeing that there might be some haunted aspects to this hotel, and there is a whole like very intriguing plot related to that. I really did like how creepy and spooky this was. But the ending of this one did fall short for me because it felt like the ending was just sort of thrown together. The characters didn't have any agency, although they were trying to have agency through the entire book. So by the time we got to the end and there was no like, this is what the characters were planning to do, it was just sort of like, here it is. I was a little bit disappointed in that, but I absolutely loved the writing style, and I loved how sort of spooky it was. Like, it was really well written, and yes, I need to read more from this author. And then the last 4 stars I have here is Love Code by Anne Aguirre. This is the sequel to Strangelove, which was one of my top books of 2020. This one I do feel like did not quite live up to the hype of Strangelove for me, because I absolutely loved that one. This is a companion novel, so instead of following Xyler and Beryl from the first book, we are following Helix, who is an AI, and Qualu, it's an alien name and I'm really bad at it, Qualu, I think I'm gonna say, who is like a scientist. And I think part of the reason that I gave this 4 stars instead of 5 is I was really lacking an element that I could personally attach to. There are no real human characters in this book. Our main relationship, because this is a sci-fi romance, is between the AI and the scientist. And I did love Helix sort of figuring out how to be more than just an AI, but everything was so foreign to me that I didn't have anything I could attach onto. Now, one thing I will say is I absolutely love this like world that this series is in, because we definitely have multiple characters, especially the aliens, that are maybe slightly human-like, because there is a note in the back of Love Code that Qualu's race is supposed to be like based on humans, like from the way past, sort of spread out through the galaxy. Like, it's interesting, but they're not actually human-like, because one of the main things that I loved about Love Code is Qualu's race of aliens has 3 different genders. They have like femme, male presenting, and I think they did call it gender neutral, I think it was. One thing that they did say in the book is that this race of aliens, once they hit like adulthood, they get to declare who they are. Any of those. And when Helix is researching the more like sexual side of this alien race, there do appear to be different sexual organs for each of the genders as well. And I don't know if that's going to be one of those things where, like, I think it's like there's certain types of fish here on Earth that if like the main female is gone, a male can turn into a female and like they change physically. I don't know if that's what happens here because we didn't really get to see that, but I did love the fact that we have the 3 different genders and we have people going by he, him pronouns, she, her pronouns, they, them pronouns. Like, I absolutely love that. Also, in this alien society, polyamorous groups are the norm. So again, a lot of things are not super similar to here on Earth as the norm, but I absolutely loved seeing it. The next book in this series is supposed to be Rebel Love. I might be wrong on that title, but it's coming out in January, and it's going to have another romance with an alien and a human. So I'm really hoping to like that one a lot because I'll have a human character to attach to. Then moving into our 4.5 stars. The first one I have here is Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare. This is the second book in a series, and I feel like there are some series where I rate some books 4.5, although I don't think I've ever gone to a full 4. No, I definitely have. There's a couple books at the end of the Mortal Instruments that I rated a 4 instead of a 5, but there are a lot of elements that I love about this. I love the Shadowhunters world. I loved a lot of the characters. I loved the whole mystery aspect here because the main point of this sequel book is that there is some like murders going on and they're trying to figure out the whodunit. So this does have a mystery aspect. However, it is a huge book. And one thing that did make me give it a 4.5 stars is there is a love triangle, quadrangle, web thing going on, and it has gone on way too long for me. There was a lot of miscommunication, and I do see some reason for it. However, this whole book had those like 4 people in this love web the entire time. There were so many times that things could have been fixed, or it could have at least been sped up a little bit, because like the other relationship duos that we have in here, because there's not really more like love triangles, they are slowly getting onto the right track, and we had some really good developments in some of the romantic aspects for the other couples in this book. But this love web is probably going to take up the whole next book as well, and I'm a little bit over it just because it's gone on way too long. Everything else though was great. I loved the mystery aspect. I love a lot of our characters. Matthew, I think, is my favorite so much right now. He is really, really well written. One thing I will say about this, just so you are aware, there are slight trigger warnings for a previous miscarriage because it happened in the short story collection that goes before this book, but it is mentioned a little bit throughout this series. Okay, and then my next 4.5 is Keeper of the Lost Cities, Exile by Shannon Messenger. This is the second book in the Keeper of the Lost Cities series, which so far I can say I absolutely love. I loved the first one so much. It made my best books of 2020 list. Actually, the first book of Chain of Iron, so Chain of Gold, made that list as well. But this one starts off very, very slow. It took a while to actually get into the plot of this book. And again, it's a big book. It is a much quicker read because it is a middle grade fantasy, but I really just wanted the pacing to speed up. Once we got to the actual like getting into the stuff and trying to figure out what was happening, I loved it. But for the first almost 200 pages, it looks like, I was just waiting for more stuff to happen. So that's a long time to wait for it to get good, but it really did pick up the pace and I loved it after that. But that means 4.5 instead of a full 5. Then the last 4.5 stars I have here, I did not realize this was going to be like my favorite book of the month, but I have Eat, Pray, Die by Chelsea Field. Again, I went into this in more depth in my Chelsea vlog, but I absolutely love this one. This is like sort of a humorous, cozy mystery type of book, self-published too, but I absolutely loved it. It follows our main character of Isabel, who is a taster. Basically a poison taster, drug taster for like the rich, the elite. They can hire these people to taste test their foods and drinks to see if anybody's like trying to kill them. And she gets hired to do this for Connor, who is a private investigator, and in the middle of doing this, another taster has been poisoned by a poison that is not the one they thought it was and is now in a coma, and they're trying to figure out exactly what happened, why that taster's client was trying to be murdered basically. And oh my gosh, this was so fun. I didn't give it a full 5 stars, and I don't fully know why now. And because I don't have a full reason for not giving it a full 5 stars, that is why it's my favorite 4.5, because I do not have a full reason. It just didn't quite feel like a 5 stars, but I absolutely loved our character of Isabel. She's an Australian who is now in America, and I don't think I've ever read a book with an Australian in it. I could be wrong, but it definitely stood out to me because I think the author of this book is Australian, and I just thought that was a really, really fun aspect. She's very snarky. The character, not necessarily the author, I don't know. The character is very snarky. She's very humorous. I loved her to death. I also think she is more mid-sized body type than skinny. Like, I just loved her so much. This also has slight romance vibes, and I do believe as we get farther in the series, because it is a series and I need to continue, there's supposed to be romance in there, and I definitely need to continue with this because it was just so much fun. Also, all the titles of all these books are puns. Like the second book is called The Hunger Pains. I need to read it. And then getting into the 2 5-stars that I had for this month, like I mentioned before, I was really scared I wasn't gonna have any 5 stars because I just wasn't finding really 5-star books at the beginning of March. But I do have 2. The first one is Death Note Volume 1 by Sugumi Oba. I have actually watched most of the Death Note anime twice. I've actually DNF'd it 2 times because of certain things that happen. But I own the entire Death Note series, and so this I actually picked for the Bookopoly-thon because one of our prompts was for like the first book in a series, and I absolutely love this. I should have been expecting to love it because of the fact that I really did enjoy the anime up to a certain point, and we obviously did not reach that certain point in this manga yet, but it is just so well done. The whole concept of the Death Note and Light sort of declaring himself God by killing bad guys is just so well done. I also love the tension between Light and L, and we didn't get a ton of that in this yet, but it's definitely ramping up, and yeah, I just sped through this. It was so much fun. And then the last book I have here, my favorite of March, Death Vigil, another book with the word death in it by Stay Up on Sage. This is a comic graphic novel. I believe it says it collects Death Vigil number 1 through 8, and I do know that the author is currently slowly writing more stuff for Death Vigil, so we should get more in this eventually. I think you can sign up for his Patreon and get some updates. I have not done that yet, but I probably will because I absolutely love this. But Stay Up on Sage is a very like commonly used artist for comics, so he's probably having a lot of other work going on, but I really enjoyed this. This is a very glary cover, I'm sorry about that. This follows a group called the Death Vigil, which is basically a group of people that have been collected by Bernadette the Reaper, and she is able to collect them because they die, and then she brings them back to work for the Death Vigil, and their whole goal is to stop necromancers. And the necromancers are trying to bring like old primordial gods into our world and cause havoc, basically. And so there is a lot of darkness in this book, a lot of fighting, but all of the Death Vigil, like all of them, are super snarky and sarcastic and just so much fun. They have so much life, even though they are dead. I did actually talk about this a little bit more in the Becca's Bookopoly-thon vlog because this is my first pick for that. And I just really loved it. Let me pull up some stuff here for you, potentially, because I don't want to give any spoilers away, but like the art style is just so much fun. Like it is so good. I really enjoy this, and when I first went into it, I thought this was the whole volume because I could not find like anywhere on Goodreads or anything like that talking about volume 2. But this whole volume definitely wraps up completely. The whole arc of this wraps up, but then it leaves a little bit open at the end for more. And so I was like, are we getting more? And I had to look it up, and I had to go through, I think, his Twitter to find that he does actually have the Patreon and some pages up for the next bit of Death Vigil because yes, I definitely need more. I loved this so much. I cannot say enough so's because it was so good. But I have not signed up for the Patreon yet. I should because I need more in this. Like I just love the characters. They were all amazing. Okay, and then that is all 16 books that I read in March. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up to let me know. Subscribe to this channel if you would like to see more videos. I do have videos up Mondays, Thursdays, and sometimes Saturdays, so I will see you then. Bye!